What is a lambda trigger on AWS? Lambda trigger on AWS is just essentially a means to invoke your lambda functions on AWS. There are whole bunch of different ways we can invoke lambda functions on AWS. You can do so programmatically through the SDK by providing the ARN and whole bunch of configurations. You can do so through the command line interface or CLI to run a command against lambda function with provided input. You can also invoke through AWS console. And finally, through service integration, which is the most important. This is the most important in my opinion because this allows to link your function with another AWS service. This is where really the magic happens. You can integrate with whole bunch of different AWS services that solve some very interesting real-time problems. Let us now take a look at some of the most common triggers for lambda functions. In Amazon Web Services, a lambda trigger refers to an event source that initiates the execution of an AWS lambda function. Lambda is a serverless compute service that allows you to run code in response to various events and triggers that we just discussed. Lambda triggers are a fundamental concept in serverless computing, enable you to build event-driven architectures. Let me explain some key points about lambda triggers. Uh, Basically, first thing, event sources, which is what we are trying to discuss. Event sources are either external services or AWS resources that can generate events or changes. Lambda can be triggered by a wide range of event sources. For example, AWS services like S3, SNS, DynamoDB, and CloudWatch events, things like that. And the event sources can be custom applications using API gateway or direct API calls. And also third party services via webhooks or other integrations can also be few examples of event sources. When a trigger event occurs, lambda automatically executes the specified function without the need to manage server infrastructure. You only pay for the compute time your function uses during the execution. Lambda functions can be triggered at any scale, whether you have a single event or thousands of events per second. AWS handles the scaling behind the scenes. Lambda functions can run concurrently in response to multiple events, allowing you to process events quickly and efficiently. Lambda functions receive data from trigger events, enabling you to respond to and process event specific information. Let us now discuss some common use cases for lambda triggers. For example, we can think of file processing, triggering lambda functions when files are uploaded to an S3 bucket for processing. This is very common use case when a object is created in the S3 or updated in the S3, then it triggers an event and that in turn can trigger an lambda function, things like that. We can also think of real-time data processing streaming data from Kinesis data streams or event data from Amazon Event Bridge. And we can also think of web application backends, building serverless backends for web applications using API gateway as a trigger. And also database operations can also be some use cases for these triggers, executing lambda functions in response to changes in data stored in DynamoDB or RDS databases and things like that. To configure a lambda trigger, We typically create a lambda function and then define the event source or the trigger and specify the function's execution role and permissions. Lambda handles the rest, ensuring that your function is invoked in response to trigger events. Okay, let us summarize. In summary, lambda triggers are a core concept of AWS Lambda that enables serverless, event driven, and scalable computing in the cloud. They allow you to build highly responsive and efficient applications that responds to a wide range of events and changes in your AWS environment. Hope you like this.